On this Thursday's early edition at 6, Korea will cut 110,000 mandatory active duty soldiers from its ranks by 2022 for a number of reasons. One being to focus more on high-tech gadgetry. Pyongyang rejects Seoul's proposal for talks on holding regular reunions for families separated by the Korean War. Their reason, important humanitarian issues such as this should not be dealt with by Red Cross officials. With a mass personal data hack of major credit card companies still fresh in Korea's mind, another leak occurs. KT Telecom's website is hacked, compromising the personal data of some 12 million clients. Stay with us for these stories and more.
당신의 유럽은 어디였나요?
Excellence in flight. Korean Air.
It is 4 a.m. in Richmond, Virginia, 11 in Kiev, and 6 on a Thursday evening here in Seoul. Good evening to you all. Welcome to Early Edition at 6. I'm Moon Gon-young.
And I'm Daniel Chan. Thank you for joining us.
Now, North Korea has said no to South Korea's proposal for working-level talks on holding additional reunions for war-separated families.
But experts say the North didn't completely shut the door on Seoul's offer. Our Hwang Sung-hee starts us off.
North Korea on Thursday rejected South Korea's proposal for talks on resuming reunions for families separated by the Korean War. The response comes one day after Seoul offered to meet for Red Cross working-level talks next Wednesday at the truce village of Panmunjom. In a statement, the North said a proper atmosphere had not been created to discuss the reunion issue. South Korea's unification ministry expressed its regrets and called on the North to reconsider.
The issue of separated families is a task to be resolved between the two Koreas before anything else, without being tied to any other issues.
But the North did not completely slam the door on the South. It said important humanitarian issues like making the reunions a regular event should not be dealt with by Red Cross officials. Experts say Pyongyang may want to meet for high-level talks to discuss a number of matters, like resuming South Korean tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgang resort. The two Koreas held their first reunion event for war-separated families in more than 3 years last month, in a move largely seen as the first step towards improving inter-Korean ties. But since then, tensions have soared following Pyongyang's string of short-range missile launches in protest against Seoul and Washington's ongoing annual joint military drills. The Unification Ministry said it's currently reviewing what steps to take next. But some experts don't expect the North to agree to talks until Seoul and Washington wrap up their joint military drills in April. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
President Park Geunhye has urged North Korea to end its nuclear weapons program so the two Koreas can revive economic cooperation projects and move towards peace and a reunification of the peninsula. At a commissioning ceremony for graduating military cadets on Thursday, the South Korean president said the North needs to realize that it cannot develop its nuclear capabilities and economy at the same time. President Park then said if Pyongyang takes sincere steps to denuclearize, Seoul and the international community could work towards helping North Korea's economy develop. The president, on the other hand, did say the South Korean military should be ready at all times for any form of provocation from the North. Now, if everything goes according to plan, Korea will have a leaner fighting force by the year 2022. Seoul's Defense Ministry proposal released Thursday calls for cutting 110,000 active duty personnel by then and focusing more on the high-tech gadgetry that will dominate the battlefields of the future. Arirang's Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The number of mandatory active duty soldiers in Korea, currently 633,000 strong, will be smaller by 2022. The Defense Ministry said Thursday it plans to cut 40,000 troops over the next 5 years and 70,000 more between 2019 and 2022, for a total reduction of 110,000. To fill the gap, the number of non-commissioned officers would increase from the current 30% to 43% by 2025. To better prepare for the handoff of wartime operational control, currently scheduled for 2015, the military plans to merge 2 of its 3 Army headquarters and set up a ground operations command. The initial merger date was set for 2030, but that's now been accelerated to 2026. In other plans, the Navy will set up a submarine command to counter the increasing underwater capabilities of the North, while the Marine Corps will establish a Jeju unit, an aviation group to defend Korea's southernmost island. With regard to the North's missile and nuclear threats, the Defense Ministry will also refocus efforts on developing the kill chain and Korea air and missile defense systems, which can detect and counter missiles and nuclear weapons from Pyongyang. The operational target range of high-tech gadgetry, such as satellite-guided missiles and next-generation fighter jets, will also get a boost. Experts say all the changes are being made in consideration of the nation's low birth rate, as the military attempts to transition into a more efficient and cheaper force. The military estimates that it will cost over $201 billion over the next 5 years to implement the plan, which represents an average annual increase of 7.2% of the defense budget. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, at the National Assembly in Seoul, rival party lawmakers went head-to-head again this Thursday, this time over revisions to the nation's pension system that the government hopes to implement this year. Our National Assembly correspondent Ji Myung-gil has more.
The ruling Saenuri Party urged lawmakers to pass revisions to the pension system at a meeting of its Supreme Council at a community welfare center on Thursday.
The parliament should act quickly to pass pending welfare bills that directly relate to improving people's livelihoods. We must make sure that there are no holes in the government's welfare programs.
The party wants to link the so-called basic pension program to the National Pension Service. Under the basic pension program, senior citizens in the poorest 70% income bracket would be given a monthly pension of $90 to $190. Seniors who have paid into an NPS account for 11 years or less would receive the most, while those paying more than 11 years would receive less, since they would also get NPS benefits. The main opposition Democratic Party is against linking the two programs.
The government should provide a basic pension to all senior citizens ages 65 and older in the bottom 70% income bracket, regardless of how much they've put into their NPS accounts.
Back at the National Assembly, lawmakers on the Welfare Committee discussed providing pensions to people with disabilities and giving allowances to people living under extreme conditions. Despite months of negotiations to find a middle ground, there have been no signs that the two parties will adjust their positions in order to strike a deal. In any case, the two parties hope to launch the new pension scheme in July. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
The Korean government has unveiled a set of measures to ease regulations that hamper corporate mergers and acquisitions. The move is aimed at fostering startups so they can more easily grow into global companies, and it is part of the government's 3-year economic innovation plan. Our Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
Late last month, Facebook bought the mobile messaging service WhatsApp for a whopping $19 billion. Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, described the 5-year-old upstart company as an incredibly valuable service. The Korean government is now aiming to promote similar mergers and acquisitions that help venture startups promote their products to more people around the world. Finance Minister Hyun Ho-seok said Thursday that the government will streamline tax and financial support systems to remove regulations that hinder corporate M&A activities. Hyun said the government expects the M&As to create a virtuous circle where venture startups can grow into global companies.
The government will expand the size of a growth fund for the merger and acquisition activities of venture firms and small and medium-sized companies to around $930 million within the next 3 years.
With the set of measures the government has laid out, a report by the Korea Institute of Finance says the nation's M&A market is expected to nearly double by 2017 to $65 billion from last year. To make that a reality, Hyun urged M&A market participants like companies and investors to make good use of the measures. The finance ministry said the local M&A market has continued to shrink after the global financial crisis in 2007 and 2008, and that its size is smaller compared to other advanced economies. It added that a sluggish M&A market prevents the kind of voluntary business restructuring that allows companies to focus their investments on core areas. The measures to boost mergers and acquisitions are in line with the 3-year economic innovation plan laid out by the Park Geunhye administration that looks for new growth engines to strengthen the nation's economic fundamentals. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
Moving over to the U.S., another huge step was made in the push for the dual use of the Korean name East Sea and the Japanese name Sea of Japan in school textbooks in the state of Virginia. Our Park Ji-won tells us more.
The so-called East Sea Bill has passed the Virginia House of Delegates, the last phase of the legislative process, in an 82-16 vote. The bill requires all textbooks approved by the Board of Education to note that the Sea of Japan is also referred to as the Korean name East Sea. As the bill passed the state Senate in January, it now only requires the governor's signature for it to become law. Governor Terry McAuliffe is expected to sign the bill by early April at the latest, and the bill will take effect from July 1st. The passing of the bill is a major victory for the state's estimated 82,000 Korean American residents. They had to overcome intense lobbying by the Japanese government, in which Tokyo warned it might reconsider Japanese investment in the state. The Korean American community in Virginia has been pushing hard for the change since the early 1990s. They, as well as all Koreans, view the Sea of Japan designation as an unpleasant reminder of Japan's brutal colonization of the Korean peninsula in the early to mid-20th century. The Korean American community aims to further introduce the dual naming bill in U.S. states with high Korean American populations like California, New York, and New Jersey. They ultimately hope to change the U.S. government's single name policy regarding sea names. The International Hydrographic Organization, or IHO, published a book designating official names of the seas in 1929. Japan registered the name Sea of Japan to refer to the body of water that separates Korea and Japan. However, as Korea was colonized by Japan back then, it had no way to voice its opposition on the world stage. The Korean government has been calling for the IHO to change the current single name of the sea to at least the dual naming, as the term East Sea has been used in Korea for thousands of years. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Without repenting past wrongdoings, a brighter future will not be secured. Those were the words of Korea's Foreign Minister on Wednesday in his address to the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva.
In the strongest language ever, Seoul's top diplomat lashed out at Japan for not facing up to its wartime crimes, especially for not acknowledging and repenting for the victims who were forced into sexual slavery by the Japanese military during World War II. We have Dr. Choi-won-do from Northeast Asia History Foundation joining us. What was your first impression of the minister's speech at the UN meeting, Doctor?
His speech was focused on the comfort women issues, And then he used the very clear words like who were drafted by the Japanese military government. And then he also used the expression of sex slave, which is used by the former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. And then that's the expression used basically by the international communities rather than the comfort to women, which is euphemistically used in Korean society. As a diplomat, his words and speeches was a very strong, resolute will to work for the comfort women issues, and he wanted to send a clear message to the international community about that.
Now, Dr. Choi, this marks the first time that Korea's foreign minister has denounced Japan for its use of sexual slaves during World War II and using such strong wording as well. Now, what is the significance of this, and why is the Korean government making this move now?
Our president, at the very beginning of this year, at the press conference, she said that as long as Japan is trying to deny the Gono statement and Murayama statement, it is very difficult to make a productive conversation with the Japanese leader. With this backdrop, recently, the Japanese Abe government said that they will investigate the validity of a Gono statement, which confirmed that there was a Japanese official involvement in mobilizing the comfort of women during the wartime.
Okay, Dr. Choi, what about the international community? How are they reacting to this, and what more do we expect?
Yeah, let me start by saying about the Japanese government and Japanese societies, the reactions to it. So far, there is no specific response about that. Just daily newspapers, they had a very short statement about the fact that Minister Yun made a speech. But we can expect that Japanese government will release another position about that. But there was an interesting comment from the former Deputy Minister, Deputy Secretary of State, Richard Armitage, when in the lecture which is made a few days ago in Washington, D.C., he said that Japanese government will not win comfort women issues debate because Japanese government and the Japanese society have been declaring that that is the society working for women's freedom and women's human right. And also, when Prime Minister Abe made a speech at the UN Assembly in the last September, he said that he would work for empowering women's right in the Japanese society. So, as long as they are supporting women's right and the human rights, and then they do not have a cause to deny that their wrongdoings about comfort women.
Now, you just briefly mentioned the Korean government's position. As for the Korean government's diplomacy against or towards the international community and whatnot, what more needs to be done on the Seoul's part in order to gain more support from the global community and bring Japan to, in fact, acknowledge and apologize for its past wrongdoings?
During the last 1 year, the Korean diplomatic communities just worked cooperative with the U.S. government and international communities. So as long as the minister-level speech was made at the international community, the higher-level government pressures will be done to the Japanese government. So if you ask me about our strategy as a Korean, I would recommend that rather than led by the grassroots level protests, we'd better make a high level diplomatic and academic explanations about historical facts. That would be more persuasive to the international communities. Sometimes Japanese governments are mobilizing their lobbyists to fight against the Korean grassroots movements in United States and international communities, we need to control the backfires in the international communities by mobilizing the grassroots movements.
Well, Dr. Cheon-jo, thank you for joining us and shedding light on this issue. We look forward to having you back here with us again next time. Thank you.
Digging deeper, getting to the bottom of stories that impact your life. Talking with you on air and online. Connecting you with experts on the world's most pressing issues. News and current affairs at its best with Moon Gon-young and Daniel Che on Early Edition at 6.
The website of a major Korean telecommunications company has been hacked, compromising the personal data of 12 million clients, including their resident registration numbers and bank account numbers. That's the majority of KT Telecom's 16 million clients. The Incheon Metropolitan Police Agency has reportedly arrested 2 professional hackers and the head of a telemarketing company for pocketing $10.8 million using that personal data. The 3 reportedly used more than half of the stolen personal data to sell smartphones, while the rest of the data was sold off to smartphone retail shops.
The Korean government unveiled a set of measures to ease regulations that hamper corporate mergers and acquisitions. The move, aimed at fostering startups so they can more easily grow into global companies, is part of the government's 3-year economic innovation plan. Our Hwang Sung-hee has more.
International efforts to resolve the crisis in Ukraine took baby steps forward in Paris Wednesday, with the United States and Russia agreeing to continue talks the next day, but no progress was made between Russia and the new Ukrainian government. Speaking after the meeting, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said talks with Russia will continue to try and de-escalate the crisis.
We agreed to continue intense discussions in the coming days with Russia, with the Ukrainians, in order to see how we can help normalize the situation, stabilize it, and overcome the crisis.
Kerry said there were no expectations that the talks would resolve the conflict, but added there are a number of ideas on the table. U.S. officials say Kerry had presented Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov with a plan for restoring Ukraine's sovereignty while addressing Moscow's concerns about its Black Sea Fleet and the many ethnic Russians that live in eastern Ukraine. The two are expected to meet again in Rome on Thursday. Lavrov confirmed that the talks would continue, but discussions between Russia and Ukraine did not materialize, with the Russian foreign minister calling Ukraine's new government illegitimate. In Brussels, NATO announced there will be no talks with Moscow after Russian President Vladimir Putin refused to pull out Russian forces from Ukraine's Crimea Peninsula, where the tense standoff continues between pro-Russian forces and the Ukrainian military. NATO said it'll also back out from a joint mission linked to Syrian chemical weapons and help build the capacity of the Ukrainian military. Meanwhile, the European Union has unveiled a package of aid and grants to Ukraine's new government worth some $15 billion over the next couple of years. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And of course, that was our Connie Kim reporting on the diplomatic efforts to resolve crisis in Ukraine that is not working out.
Right, and we apologize for that technical glitch. Well, today here in Korea is something called Gyeongchip, which is the day when the frogs are supposed to wake up from their long winter sleeps to celebrate the start of spring. But they might want to sleep a bit longer, and let's find out why by turning to our Michelle Park at the Weather Center. Michelle.
Good evening. Like you said, today is supposed to be the beginning of spring here in Korea, but the cold temperature would seem to suggest otherwise.
But it can't stay cold forever. When can we expect a warm-up?
We're going to have to wait a couple more days now. Tomorrow is going to be even colder than today, but temperatures are expected to go up again on Saturday. Now, tomorrow we'll have clear skies nationwide with highs reaching up to 8 degrees. However, the wind chills will remain below 0. Now, going over to our readings, Seoul will drop down to -5 degrees in the morning and gets up to 5 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Daegu and Busan will get up both at 8 degrees. Now down onto Jeju Island, it's going to be sunny with clear skies and a high of 7. Dokdo makes it up to 1 and Amanggungang tops out at -1. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park and back to you guys.
Thank you for that, Michelle. And that brings us to the end of our newscast. Thank you for watching. This has been Daniel Che.
And I'm Moon Gon-young. Thank you as always for being here with us. Have a wonderful rest of the evening and we'll see you right back here, same time tomorrow. Good night.